welcome to our journey aboard the Regent 7 Seas Voyager for the World Holiday Spectacular. This 25-day voyage took us from Barcelona, Spain to Cape Town, South Africa. Already published is the ship tour, the dining and drinking guide, and the pros and cons of this particular voyage. We'll also report on an extension we did in Cape Town, 4 nights and 3 days in that beautiful city and the surrounding area. This is part 1, so join us as we embark in Barcelona, spend a day at sea, make a stop in Cadiz, Spain, another day at sea, and then the island of Lanzarote and port of Arrecife in the Canary Islands. And now a quick word about the travel. We flew out of home around noon on Delta Airlines. The flight was about 40 minutes late in taking off, but we weren't too worried about that as we had a 5.5-hour layover in New York. From home, it was first class to New York and JFK Airport. With that long a layover, even though we arrived a little bit late, you can imagine, since we were flying business class, we headed right to the lounge. Now I have to say, the Delta Lounge in New York was quite nice. We were greeted by musicians playing some soft jazz, well-prepared food, and even a wine tasting. But soon enough, it was time to hop on our overnight flight to Barcelona with an expected 9 a.m. arrival. Well, arrive we did in Barcelona, and debarking the plane, we headed off to customs to grab our luggage. But first, we had to make it through this incredibly long line wrapping around the airport before we could actually clear customs. But once through, Regent met us on the other side, and since it was still early, escorted us to the airport hotel and a nice day room where we could wait it out until the ship was ready for boarding. From the airport, it was about a 45-minute ride with 8 other passengers to the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. To get there, we drove through several neighborhoods that were just mercilessly tagged and festooned with graffiti. But it wasn't long before we caught our first glimpse of the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. Check out my ship and suite tour guide on the Voyager, already published. As soon as we arrived at the terminal, it was another line. Unusual for Regent, the line wrapped around 3 times and was rather slow moving. It seemed like every bus carrying every passenger arrived at the same time. But once through that, it was up a set of escalators, a walk along the top of the cruise terminal, the 7 Seas Voyager. Once aboard, we were welcomed with a glass of champagne and told to go wait in one of the public areas for our suites to be readied. This was Christmas time, so the Voyager was all dressed up for the holidays, including this interesting gingerbread house display. Inside and then went outside to check that out and for a not-so-scenic overlook of Barcelona. The announcement was made, the rooms are ready, and so we headed off to Suite 646 to unpack and get ready for the evening's festivities. Regent always supplies a nice bottle of champagne on ice and a fully stocked minibar for you to enjoy. For our first night on board, we headed to the Compass Rose, the main dining room of the ship, beautifully appointed and replete with Versace tableware. For more on the Compass Rose and the other dining venues, check out our dining and drink guide, already published. Well, after dinner and a bit more carousing around, it was time to hit the sack and get ready for the following day, which was to be a sea day en route to Cadiz, Spain. After getting up and a workout of 3 miles on the treadmill, we headed out to explore the ship just a bit more. For lunch, we stopped in La Veranda today to enjoy the lunchtime buffet. La Veranda is a popular hotspot in the afternoon for lunch and features a carving station, different every day, sometimes themed lunches, and a wide variety of other foods that are well prepared if sometimes a little under-seasoned. Next up that afternoon was a little of the Mediterranean afternoon tea in the Horizon Lounge, Deck 5 aft. Afternoon tea adhered to some themes. Today was French and was quite good. Check out our dining and drink guide already published for a bit more on the afternoon tea and some of the ups and downs of that particular service. Afternoon tea was always accompanied by one of the resident musicians, and as an experience, it was quite well done. Tonight found us standing in line once more, wrapped around the atrium, waiting to get into the Constellation Theater and the Captain's Welcome Party and the introduction of the ship's officers.
So many holidays to celebrate as we head down towards Cape Town.
Cruz's voice. I'm French.
After our welcome reception, it was once more time for, well, dinner. And dinner tonight would once more be at the Compass Rose. After a fine meal of perfect steak tartare and a avocado and crab appetizer, followed by roast duck and diverse scallops, we opted for a bit of dessert featuring one of my all-time favorites, a Grand Marnier soufflé. Finishing up the meal, it was back to the Horizon Lounge for a nightcap. This time, a perfectly made top-shelf margarita. Then it was off to bed to get ready for our next stop in Cadiz, Spain. The ancient port city of Cadiz, with a population of around 110,000, is also known as the gateway to Seville. But we were neither going to Seville or Cadiz today, but instead we're going to hop on a bus and take an excursion to the white villages of Andalusia. After about an hour's drive, we made it to the village of Arcos de la Frontera. We had hoped that our drive would allow us to escape from the cold, blustery, rainy day that was in Cadiz, but no such luck. It was still raining, so it was a somewhat miserable walk up to the hill to a hotel to be fed a glass of wine. At least the walk was interesting, if not so very visually productive. The architecture, streets, and alleyways would certainly have been photo-worthy if it had not been raining. But unfortunately, the rain put a damper on everything, and the forest of umbrellas that sprouted from all my fellow tourists made it almost impossible to get a good, unrestricted picture or video. But regardless, we continued up the hill through the narrow streets, now understanding why the bus had let us off down at the bottom of the hill. Passing narrow, mysterious alleyways and ancient churches, we continued on our way to eventually find our goal in an open plaza at the top of the hill. I thought, finally, photo ops. They had a castle. It was closed. They had a fortified church. It was a Sunday and in operation, so we couldn't go inside. They were supposed to have a beautiful view and overlook. Sorry, closed due to repairs and construction. So instead, we went into what turned out to be our end goal, a nice hotel for a glass of wine. Now, we did get a glimpse of the view that might have been from a window in the hotel, but we were not allowed on the hotel's patio because of the rain, where we could have gotten an unobstructed view. Oh well, c'est la vie. It was time to leave the hotel and do a bit of a walk around the plaza. One interesting thing we noticed was that these tiny, narrow streets did indeed allow car traffic. I watched this car go through this archway where I swear there was only about 2 inches of room on each side. Soon enough, and becoming a bit weary of the rain and the cold, most of our group started its way back down the hill and to the bus. Most of our group bypassed those interesting shopping opportunities, handmade leather gods, anybody, and stuck to our mission of finding the bus and relative comfort. Down we went until we finally got back to the bus parking space. Climbing aboard, and we were back on our way to the Seven Seas Voyager. How do we rate this excursion? Well, due to the vagaries of the weather and the fact that the viewpoints were all closed down due to construction, and I'd have to say it was a fairly miserable time. After our journey to the white villages of Andalusia, we returned to Cadiz to find it, well, sort of dried out. At least it wasn't raining, so we decided to walk across the street to the old town and move around a bit. This was our second time in Cadiz, so if you're interested in a bit drier and sunnier overview of Cadiz, check out part 1 of our 2023 cruise aboard the Silver Sea Silver Nova for a more in-depth and drier look at the city. At least as we wandered around this time, there was a definite lack of crowds. But eventually it started raining once more, and we decided it was once more time to head back to the Seven Seas Voyager. We frittered away the rest of the afternoon before changing for dinner and heading to our reservation at the French bistro Chartreuse. Chartreuse is one of the 2 venues aboard the Voyager that require a reservation, the other being Prime 7, the steakhouse. However, unlike some other lines, there is never a charge for dining at Chartreuse or Prime 7. Chartreuse is a French bistro, highlighting French wines and French food. This evening she had halibut and I had chicken supreme. And while my chicken was a bit dry, she assured me her halibut was one of the best she ever had. And after taking in a show, it was time for a bit of late night karaoke. Sorry.
My wild desire, I fell in a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire.
Day 4 of our voyage brought us another sea day en route to Arrecife in the Canary Islands. After a morning of exercise and lectures, it was time for lunch, and this time again at the Campus Rose. Lunch at Campus Rose features some dishes that are featured from a restaurant not aboard the Voyager, and that would be Pacific Rim. This was a welcome change from what we had experienced in the past, where on a ship like the Mariner or the Voyager, there is no Pacific Rim. Now, we were warned by the captain that today would be a rather rough one. We were experiencing 15 to 17 foot swells, and we had a lot of side-to-side motion. So much motion that we were all staggering around like drunken sailors from one side of the hallway to the next. The afternoon would be better, we were told, with only 12-foot swells expected. Later on that evening, we had dinner at Sette Mare. Sette Mare is the Italian eatery and the third specialty restaurant aboard the Voyager. In the morning and the afternoon, it is La Veranda Buffet, and in the evenings, half of it closes down but becomes Sette Mare. Check out the dining and drink guide for the Voyager now on our channel. After our meal, we decided to go to the Horizon Lounge for a little Christmas music presented by the members of the Voyager band. While good, sadly it was what we would call under-attended. Well, that was it. It was time for bed once more to get ready for our next port of call, Arrecife on the island of Lanzarote in the Canary Islands. Widely considered a desert island, Lanzarote has a population of around 68,000. Arrecife is the capital and most populous city of the island. Lanzarote is the fourth largest island in the Canary Islands chain and the third most populous. The Canary Islands are a part of Spain, despite being located 600 miles from the Iberian Peninsula. The Canary Islands are much closer in distance and culture to the east coast of Africa, only 80 miles away. Our excursion today was called Southern Lanzarote and Wine Tasting Tour. The interesting architecture of the island had a lot more to do with Africa and the Moorish influence than even Spain. First up on our tour, after a 45-minute drive, was Tomé National Volcanic Park. On the way into the park, we saw a camel caravan. More about the camels later. The landscape of the park is a volcano-blasted moonscape that covers all of the park and much of the island of Lanzarote. There's truly only one stop in the park, and that's at the Visitor Center. There, we would witness the 3 experiments to show just how active the volcanic thermal activity really was. First up, a ranger scooped up some volcanic soil right from the surface of the ground and threw a bit in our hands. It was hot enough that you could hold it, but you didn't want to for very long. Next up, a ranger tossed a bunch of plant material down a volcanic vent where it almost instantly burst into flames. Next, we kept walking up the hill to near the restaurant. Here we would witness the steam geyser. Water is simply poured down a pipe that connects with the underground thermal vent, and the result is an instant geyser. Heat at the bottom of those pipes exceeds 300 degrees centigrade or 540 degrees Fahrenheit, causing the water to be instantly transformed into steam. And while we didn't get a demonstration of it, interestingly, the restaurant cooks its barbecue on a grill that is powered by only the heat from the volcanic vents. After taking the time to snap a couple of more pictures, it was time to board our bus once more for a ride through the blasted landscape of the park. Which was disappointing since there were a lot of great and fantastical landscapes to be documented. While we made this loop around the park, it was clear more and more people were joining the queue to enjoy the otherworldly landscape the park offers. From here that we were going to enjoy the most unique aspect of our trip, the camel ride. Camels were imported into Lanzarote in the early days to aid in the labor of transforming the island. Once a day, the camel herders go up into the mountains to select a group of camels for this particular ride. There are said to be about 600 camels living in the wild, but for food and water, they will work at doing the tourist business. All the camels you see here are females. Apparently, the male camels refuse to do the work. But as a reward for the gals doing all the work, all camels, male or female, are fed and watered every day. Each camel carries 2 passengers in a unique saddle. If one passenger is larger than the other, a bag of sand is hung from that side to counterbalance the heavier rider. camels have a unique gait and are sometimes called the ships of the desert. This gal decided her workday was over and took a lie down, refusing to get up and move. Since they are all tethered together, that happened to stop that particular line of camels. Eventually, the handlers got her up and going again, and we started to descend toward the car park. Now, the camel behind Song seemed to like her a lot, kept headbutting her and seemingly snuggling with her. From there, it was bye to our camel and back on the bus and headed towards our quote-unquote wine tasting. How does one grow wine on a desert island, you might ask? Well, they plant them in these little cubby holes. They have to do so because the wind is very intense on the island of Lanzarote. So while the grape yield is not high, supposedly the few plants that are producing grapes produce a satisfying and robust wine. So we stopped here for our wine tasting and were surprised and disappointed to find out that as we walked into the building, they handed us 2 shot glasses of wine and expected us to down it before we reached the end of the line, and this method produced no wine tasting at all. But we were good. It was comical in a way, if a bit disappointing. There it was, our wine tasting, quote-unquote, finished. We were back on our bus and headed back to the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. To me, this was a very worthwhile excursion from the standpoint of the landscapes, but not the wine tasting. It could have been better if they had let us off the darn bus to take some pictures as we moved around the park. But there appeared to be no way and nowhere that you could do that. Back on board the ship, and it was a quick stop at the pool grill for lunch. Please see our dining and drink guide for more information on the pool grill. We also made a stop at the pool bar for a top shelf margarita for me and a Midori margarita for her. We frittered away the rest of the afternoon, had dinner once more in Compass Rose, and then met new friends in the observation lounge for a sail-away drink. Up in part 2, we make our second stop in the Canary Islands in Santa Cruz de Tenerife, then 2 days at seas, followed by Mindelo in Cape Verde. Well, that's it for part 1 of Barcelona to Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Check out more at tomsmultiinterest.com. And stay tuned for part 2, now in the works. Please check out the Ship and Suite Tour, Dining and Drink Guide, and the pros and cons of this voyage, ready published. Thank you again for watching, and if you have the opportunity and the inclination, please check out some of our other videos. And as always, safe and happy travels from Tees, Cruise, and Travel Muse.